You're silly. It's Suzanne and Kim back with another episode of Energy Unleashed. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Hey, Kim.
Hello.
You got me laughing before we even pushed the go button. Okay, for anybody that has not seen us before, this podcast, Energy Unleashed, is all usually centered around client sessions that I have as an energy practitioner. I don't necessarily let Kim in on the information so she can have a genuine response, just like our listeners would. And what I wanted to bring up today is something that actually is quite I want to say happening in a big way, but it's happening in so many different ways. And I want to talk about spiritual awakening. Because we have this ascension process going on, we have something called spiritual awakening. And I think that that's kind of a broad, a really broad subject, or a really broad, I guess, definition to it. And so I'm going to put my glasses on because of the fact I told Kim I can't read my own writing since I still got a splint on. So what is spiritual awakening? I want to go through that first, Kim, and then just kind of get a handle on that. And then I'm going to go into a couple of the client things, because the client things are super interesting because they designate like three totally different responses to this situation. And it's really cool how they're so completely different. So first and foremost, what is spiritual awakening? And when you really think about it, it's basically a call to a higher consciousness. It's going deeper in terms of your mental awareness, your connection. Sometimes it's very spontaneous. Most of the time it's spontaneous, in my opinion, to some extent, but some people are really into it right now because they think with this ascension process that they're supposed to be spiritually awakening. So some people are doing the push to themselves on purpose, or they're wanting to jump on a bandwagon. But true awakening comes, in my opinion, kind of spontaneous. It like shifts your perspective. It shifts your worldview. And it's a really personal thing that happens. It's a transformation on a such deep personal level that it absolutely transcends and changes your ego to some extent. It takes the ego beyond this so-called ordinary ego, and it gives you much more of a sense of infinite. It's about truth. It's about searching. It's about, there's a million questions. It just, to me, true spiritual awakening in some regard usually is spontaneous. I think you can go somewhere for some help thinking I'm going to awaken myself a little bit. I'm going to go see a healer. I'm going to go see a teacher. I'm going to take a class. But the actual kind of a thing inside, that ooh-ah is very personal and very intimate. And it, I think, surprises you. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. Why did I show up in your healing room, 11 years ago? I don't know.
Right. And I'm going to go through the signs and symptoms first, and then we can talk about yours. So some of the signs and symptoms are like really increased intuition. Lots of times your so-called psychic centers will awaken or activate. Now, people like me, mine were dormant for a long, long time in my life, and mine reactivated. So mine came on, and I'm talking holy bananas, spontaneous. It was like boom. And I was so freaked out, and we'll get into that more in a minute, but I was so freaked out because it came on so fast. Empathy is huge. Your sensitivities, period, are really heightened. And you are really heightening things like your creativity, your connection to sound, color, music, all those things want to be heightened. But it really gets into wanting to know more than beyond here. Where are we going? What do we do when we die? I want the truths of the ancients. And so it's this quest in a really profound way, because our perception overall is really changed and shifted. And it is giving us an indication of our interconnectedness, like our unity. We're starting to go, there's something that is either not right, or I haven't remembered, or there's something about oneness, and I really, really want to understand that. And so that's kind of what I see in my people, and for sure in myself. That's kind of like the whole thing. Does any of that resonate with what happened with you?
All of it, I think, and everybody goes at this, I think, in a different pace. All the people
Totally.
I've met, everybody's experience is so different, but I was so shut down and numb I think working and so focused on work in my life that I had no idea until I started the healing process with you
Yeah.
energetically. Um, and the things that were most immediate for me was the nature
Mm,
outside. All of a sudden, I started to just like really look around and look at the beauty and the things that were around me, and took a few trips that were just spectacular that showed even more of nature and the
yep.
beauty. And then people, my perspective of people that I started to observe more and not
Hmm.
to try and control situations, that kind of thing. So it was like a gradual
Yeah.
awakening. And then I have to say, once I went to Peru, that was like my boom, like
Like kick in the butt.
kick
Yeah.
in the rear end that
Yeah.
really opened up my psychic skills more, because I was able to meditate, see colors, see faces, see, different things. Plus my intuition changed
Yes.
significantly with that. So yeah.
Yeah, and my I was super psychic as a kid for anybody that hasn't listened to me before, and then shut down that I mean, I always owned my intuition, but I didn't want to be that weirdo. And
Mhm.
so, but when mine came back on, it was like boom, and it was in my 30s, and it was so extreme that I thought I was going crazy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So, I think this is such a weird subject because I have had such an array of
Mhm.
clients. I have some of them that just come in, and I watch a lot of podcasts in this realm, obviously, and I watch a lot of YouTubes, and sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm trying not to be judgmental, but I'm failing miserably right this moment because I sit there and I watch people and it's like, oh, I had my awakening. Well, I'm 60, what am I now? 64, I think. 64 years old, and I've been doing this my entire life. And you're still awakening. Your technical awakening doesn't happen like boom. Just because you wake up a little bit doesn't mean that you're totally awakened, in my opinion, and take what resonates, everyone. But we sit there and we think, oh, I've had clients come in and just kind of flippantly say, well, I'm awakened. And I'm like, and when did that happen? Last month. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, good luck because you got to probably a good another 10 years of understanding and learning and bringing forward things and changing and observing. And like I said, like you said, you evolve into these stages and these steps. And I'm not dissing their experience of awakening. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just really trying to get the thought process out is that it's not a finished thing.
No, and the biggest part of that would be healing yourself and
Yes.
changing your beliefs or releasing, you know, the things that are just hanging in there that keep you from spiritually moving up. I mean, that's a huge
It's
part of
work. Spiritual awakening doesn't just go boom and I just all of a sudden I'm fabulous, and we
it.
do a
Yeah.
lot in the spiritual community about 3D and 5D, and now all my family's all 3D and I'm 5D. That's
Mhm.
all just so silly in my opinion because it's so judgmental and we're all in 3, 4, and 5 all the time. And sometimes we hit 7 and sometimes we hit 13. God only knows what dimension we're in or resonance we're in during things. But to sit there, I think, and designate, I think for me is more separation again. And what spiritual true awakening is unification. It's interconnectedness. And so at the same time, I really want to stress that this can be very confusing. I lost my mind when mine was happening because I was like literally overnight being able to see in bodies, overnight being able to see energy signatures, overnight remembering that I have things and beings talking in my head and now they're back. I mean, I thought I was ready for the loony bin. And 20 years ago, there wasn't even a podcast, by the
No,
way. That wasn't even like a thing,
no.
much less a whole lot of spiritual healers or mentors or things. And so I suffered extremely through this process of heightened everything. I couldn't even talk about being an empath. I was over the top taking in everything and anything. And I thought I was insane. So I have a blog on my normal website at the S. Worthley website about the ascension process, and the stories on there just show how crazy this is for people and how lonely this process can be because it's
Mhm.
personal. And they go from things like, I thought I was insane. I'm so glad I found this. I'm not as crazy as I thought I was, and on and on and on, because you get these peaks into worlds that we're not usually privy to, and you think you're nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it isn't the standard quota or standard life that we were
Yeah.
told or taught as, we were younger.
And then conversely, and again, I'm really, really doing my best to not sound judgmental, but a lot of these other things that I watch and follow have people that are like, oh, I woke up last year and now I do this, and this. Well, I think that's fabulous and wonderful, but it's almost like now it's competitive and I do what you do and I do it your way and I do. And for me, spiritual awakening is intensely intimate, intensely personal in terms of pulling forward what you know from your soul's essence, not copying who does what because you do that, now I do that. You do light language now. All of a sudden I do light language two weeks later. I mean, and it's just to me, it's kind of this weird spiritual community competition sort of a thing sometimes. So I stay out of that as much as I can, and I do my best to not try to do it like someone else does or do it because someone else does. What I do my best and as meditatively or doing my own work, I'm finding that, like, for example, I don't do light language. I don't care to do light language. If it comes out, I would be shocked because my weird thing is I work with my breath. Now, at the same time, my breath has been changing. So does my breath turn into light language all of a sudden? No, mine's turning into almost like a dragon, weird kind of like I can hear words through my breath, but I'm not pushing myself to do light language because that's what all the other spiritual people do. So I think what I'm encouraging and inviting for people to please don't think you have to compete because we all do it differently, right?
Yeah. And I guess one, isn't it that we are coming down here to experience Earth for a certain purpose, and whatever skills come are for that purpose? I would
Right.
think that all of our skills are going to be different because we're focused or doing different things here, as the unity of one. Like there's just different skills.
We have
My
different
skills are,
jobs.
yeah,
Yeah.
my skills are so different than your skills
Yes.
in what we do. And I resonate with things that are different than what you resonate with,
Yep.
and some similar things, but yeah, that just, so don't think that you, like you said, have to do all of those things. Try them. If they
Yeah.
resonate, they resonate. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah. And it might come in 2 years. This is again why we don't awaken overnight. Now, the awaken overnight does happen to some extent. Like I said, one day I was normal. I love that. Or one day I wasn't normal, and then the next day I was. Maybe you want to put it that way. But
Right.
I think that spontaneous reaction is very immediate. But in my opinion, I listen to a lot of these newer people and they're like convinced totally that this is it and they know everything now. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you haven't even experienced half of what can come forward in you because it isn't done. There isn't a done.
Mm-mm.
And it's really the other thing that I find is so interesting is, well, I've awakened and now I should be doing, and the should is in there.
Mm.
I've awakened and now I should be telling everyone what to do. I've awakened and I should be hanging a shingle. I've awakened and I should be getting my family and my friends to understand everything. And this is something that I'm really putting out there as a bit of a warning because this can get us into lots of trouble in
Oh,
terms of not honoring where the others are at. And
right.
true awakening means that I have no conditions attached and that I'm not pushing my stuff and my beliefs on anybody. I am literally meeting them where they are at with no judgment. And I find a lot of newly awakened people think that everybody else has to get on their bus right away. And this is something that I've learned over the 20 years of there's absolutely no way you can get somebody on your bus. They might peek in the window and they might decide for themselves, or they might wave as you drive by. It's not the job once you find this stuff to push it or send it out. Now, can I plant seeds? Certainly.
Mhm.
Can I hold my truth and share? Certainly. And we're going to get into that with some of these clients that some can share and some can't. And it's a personal choice
Mhm.
on how much you put out there. But again, this is a conditionalized way that the human works. I want you to understand everything now. I want you to believe what I believe. I want you to see what I see or know what I know. Why? Because then it's real for me. So a
Mhm.
true awakening has a sense of certainty. A true awakening has stages. Literally, it usually comes because there's some sort of a chaotic upheaval in your life. There's something that is happening that oftentimes it can be health, it can be relationships, it can be world oriented, but there's some semblance of an upheaval in your life where you're struggling to, this is, we can equate it to the dark night of the soul, by the way, also, because the dark night of the soul is part of an awakening process. And then we have separation. Oh my God, I'm different. Something's happening. No one's knowing this. I am seeing these things or hearing this stuff and no one else does. And you have this really lonely sense of separation. And then it usually moves into, yeah, but this is real. This is my real. This is like, that's a realization of this is really happening for me. And then it is really, in my opinion, this is where the years come in. This is why I believe that there's a process of, and a lot of people say 10 years. I sometimes think it's way more. It can be shorter, but I think the certainty comes so deep when you have done years and years of this, because you're finding certainty in so many different places and spaces. And when you go through the certainty, you don't care about the validation. So you come into this, I am just satisfied that this is my life now. I'm not doing this. It is who I am and what I am, and I'm continuing to evolve into this. And so stages are really part of this process, in my opinion. And we go through a lot of different variables on those, if that makes some sense.
It does. And I think there's layers. Like you think that
Oh,
you
God.
have gone through healing for yourself in some of these stages, and then all of a sudden it pops back up,
Yep.
and you have to revisit all of that and go through it again.
And
Um,
realization can be one of those, Kim. It's like, oh my God, the reason I did this all my life is because this is what my family thought, that kind of a thing can be really rocky during that process of realization. And it's really important for us. And then I remember really the separation was very difficult for me. This is actually before I even knew you. I was like, holy bananas, I'm seeing things and hearing things that nobody sees, and I think I'm nuts. And I feel like I'm walking through this world, and this is some of the things I hear from clients and on my blog. I'm walking through a completely different world than anybody else. No one is seeing this. No one is seeing this. And you get really frustrated sometimes in awakening because you're so freaked out and mad that nobody else is seeing what you're seeing. And it's so difficult to get from there to certainty.
oh yeah. For me, it was just similar to the awakening being more of a slow, all of the things that you talked about in the stages were also, very slow. So I was in a place of not, um, telling people what they should believe or how things really work.
Yeah,
But it was interesting in conversation how things would come up and people would ask questions,
right,
that lead to better conversation, uh,
right.
where you're actually planting a seed in a more healthy way. I think that that seemed to be, and it's amazing how many people come into your life during the stages
Yes.
that
And
weren't
the
there
right people
before.
will come. The right people will come. I tell that to my clients all the time. They will come
Yeah.
to support it. On the other hand, I remember very many conversations in old friend groups
Mhm.
where I would bring something forth and the whole room would shift like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't
Mhm.
like what you're saying. This is uncomfortable. And they would do their best to flip the conversation back to 3D normal, let's pick on somebody or let's make fun of something. And I'm like, no. And oftentimes, and I'm not exaggerating, I would choose to leave
Mhm.
because I couldn't maintain myself in terms of that negative frequency any longer. So your friends will change.
Mhm.
That separation does go to the extent of, sometimes my relationships will leave or completely change, or I'll have new ones,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and part of that, I think for me was, um, I needed, there's a point where it takes a long time with the ego. If you're really connected to the ego and that's how you really drove your life for a long time, to change how you work with your ego and the
Yep.
validation that's needed when you're working with your ego.
Yeah.
And so in friend groups, that was interesting to see. Wow, I was really great because I was a VP of a company, and how fun that was. And then to see, what do you mean you're not working? You're not working anymore? Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you really doing with your life?
Yeah.
Yeah, like how do you do that? And it's so interesting how the judgment really brought out what people really thought of me as a person. They weren't thinking of me as the person that I thought they were thinking of me as, I guess. It's so that part of the separation,
Because you were a human doing when they knew you. You weren't a human
yeah,
being.
right, right.
Right?
And there are relationships that have evolved into amazing relationships, and there's relationships that just are not there anymore.
Yeah.
That's just part of the process. Yeah.
Yeah. So the one client that I had is a female, and she was probably, gosh, I don't know, maybe late, maybe early 40s, what I'm not sure, but whatever. And hers was instant, like boom.
Mm,
And all of the psychic senses were online. And it was like, oh my God, like overnight, I'm hearing voices. I have guides up the yin yang. And she was into this probably about, I don't know, maybe half a year or so when she came to see me. And I was helping her just integrate some of this stuff, because sometimes it's just like this I'm getting downloads, meaning I'm getting information just pummeled into me. I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things, I can't even get a handle on this. And hers was over the top, like, and the confidence in her was amazing. She just absolutely was owning it, even with being overextended on it all. She
mhm.
was just like, no, this is what's happening, and I'm doing this. And it was not scary for her, but it was overwhelming. And I can relate to that. Mine was so overwhelming that I literally was in the middle of the street one day screaming, stop, stop, stop.
Right,
Because mine
right.
was too crazy.
Yeah.
But again, I didn't have any support. I didn't know that this was a thing.
Mhm.
So hers was so crazy. But again, it was very much about, this is the truth. This is right. This is the other thing that I would invite people, keep a little flexibility in there, because it's your version of right. It's what you're learning right now at the time. It's what's happening for you and your perspective and your vision and your container. Your matrix is showing you this experience that might not be my right.
Which,
And
by the
I
way, when
think
you say that, it changes.
I was just gonna say
Because it's like in the
it can be
moment.
evolving. Yes, it
Yeah.
can be. That's exactly what's coming out of my mouth. It can be you're right for right now, but trust me, after 20 years, it's like, holy bananas, I don't think that at all anymore. That isn't even close to my right now.
Mhm.
And so I think the ones that get the boom like that, once they get to this certainty or realization and certainty, it can almost flip back to a little bit of egoic and that I'm right. And that's really difficult, because that will really close off other people.
Yeah.
I mean, that will really shut other people down. And so, but it can be also very difficult to be struggling privately. So, the second client is so fun, because this is a gentleman who actually, the wife is a client as well, and the wife is gone through a little bit more of the process, and he's been more of the observer, watching his wife with the curiosity, etc. And this happens all the time in my office, as we're talking and they're learning new ideas and they're learning new perspectives, they're learning new potentials for ways to look at things. This is one of my favorite client experiences when they're new. Their little brain just goes like this. It's like boom, boom, boom. It's like little light bulbs are just exploding above their head, because it's like, oh, wow. Oh, I never thought of that. Oh, and this happens a lot, by the way, around the subject of death and dying, because I'll have a lot of people come in here with really sad situations of grieving and death. And when we start to talk about more the soul essence and contracts and where they go and what they do, the realization on their face is just like, oh my gosh. And again, I'm always saying through the entire thing, this is not, doesn't have to be your truth. These are just the way that I experience and what I'm giving you for information. Let your body tell you if this activation is correct for you, but to watch a person actually unfold and activate, it happens in my office all the time. And for some strange reason, they're usually men, because the woman or the friend that's the female
Yeah.
encourages them to come, because they have this inkling that the dude will have it,
Yeah.
but God forbid your friend can say it or your partner can say it, but that weird lady in Wiper Lake can say it. So it's really funny, because they will just spontaneously sort of like boom, 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 and they don't 100% activate everything here, but it like sticks little
It's like
pilot
planting the
lights.
seed, isn't it? Planting the seed of there's another.
It's almost bigger than a seed because I think a seed planting means I'm going to say something and it will germinate all by itself as time goes by. This is more like I don't necessarily light the bonfire under their ass, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a pretty good flame. And they walk out with the WTF look. And
Yeah.
that's my favorite. They're just like that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and I
so tell
love that.
me, what does it look like energetically for you when you go through that with a
I
client?
literally can watch their face and it's mostly their spiritual field that is
Okay.
it's like and a lot of times what's happening is I'm just opening the channels energetically. They're getting the downloads. I mean, I'm not going to shove a download in somebody. That's not my job. Their job is to find that download from their higher self, but I
Mhm.
certainly can open up the channels with them. And it's almost like and a lot of times they'll be talking and I'm like, really, their eyesight should be here and they're over here. Because they're downloading and it's really cute and it's really fun. So those are seriously some of my favorite clients ever. And then the third category I can relate to also in that this particular gentleman, he's a little bit older and has kept mm, his beliefs, his experiences, his his pondering, all of it to himself,
Mm,
most all of his life. And in this particular situation, I think it's because the family didn't necessarily support it all. I
okay.
find this with star seeds a lot. I find this with unbelievable amounts of star seeds that have had UFO connection and or abduction connection. If somebody has ever really done some galactic connection as a kid and the family doesn't support it, they will pull that in completely because it's terrifying for them to be judged or to even think about that. Or I don't want to open that up because I don't know if I want that to happen again. So lots and lots of these kinds of clients. And I do get a general amount of starseed clients just because of my frequency. And oftentimes they will hide all of that. And my office will be a place where they can actually have a safe conversation. This
Mhm.
has gone down to young clients, all the way into childhood clients, young kids up to, college age. They're still stuffing a lot of that up to some are older. And I think that's a really hard one to be because you think you're really crazy. And
Oh, yeah.
and you don't want to share because nobody in the general public is sharing that at all.
No.
Even right now with disclosure and governmental stuff, and let's pop some stuff on YouTube about aliens in the mall, all that stuff is still like, yeah, but I don't know if I really want to step into that spotlight. And so there's that awakening is an ongoing, constant evolution of awakening and understanding and remembering, but stuffing. And that can be very detrimental.
Well, that's detrimental. Like, can you explain what it does to your body?
It's sadness and it will stuff it and it can do all kinds of things as far as, now I can't, I have sore joints or I have RA or I have fear of opening up and I have, all kinds of different things can happen. And I know how that feels because I remember being in like even maybe maybe late junior high-ish age. I was Catholic, so they
Mhm.
overlap. So it would be the first part of high school for me, 8, 9, 10th grade,
Mhm.
terrified to say anything about anything, because nobody else talked about that stuff.
Mhm.
And so I kept everything to myself. And, it's just not anything anybody knew, even in my own family.
Right.
So that's really detrimental because it will, the throat will be shut down, the heart will be shut down, the power will be shut down. It can affect your whole body.
Mhm.
And there's such a loneliness and such a freak out that I think it's sadness. It creates sadness.
Mhm. Especially, I think, I mean, in looking back on my situation, while there were good influences, the pressure to believe certain things especially going to the Catholic school, um, when it didn't feel right, there were things that resonated, but there were other things that just didn't feel right for me. And I
Yep.
didn't understand that. I didn't know what it really meant. And then what do you do with that? You don't do anything with it. You just do what you're supposed to do.
Well,
It's the
so
supposed to.
sometimes, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember really simple things like my little head, they would say, bow your head for God's blessing in church, and everybody's heads would go down, and my little 6-year-old head would go up, and I'm like, no, I'm not, no, I don't do that. And do this sign of the cross. I'm like, no, my body won't do that. I listened even back then to my little body, but I get what you're saying. The nun would, hit you with the ruler if you didn't do what you're supposed to do, right? So
Yeah.
I think that this is a really common thing for people to stuff. And awakening in a spiritual awakening isn't always the same, by the way, as UFO, alien, galactic abduction, all that stuff, but oftentimes they do cross over.
Mhm.
And I think the sad part about, I have a couple people that I know for a fact have been abducted, whether they choose to go or they get taken. I have at least a handful of clients that kind of go back and forth. That's a different situation getting taken and going. But regardless, they are less willing to open up their whole spirituality because this piece of the unknown is scarier. And
Mhm.
so therefore they're not allowing themselves to open up to the trees or the angels or the whatever that are all the other embodiments of source, because that particular embodiment scares them.
Yeah.
And I think that that can thwart a spiritual awakening. And I
Mhm.
think that that's very difficult. So I have one woman, in fact, that I encourage all the time, really get out into nature, work with nature, because there's nature embodiments of God source, not just galactic ones, not just, alien ones. And so it's hard because that will scare them. I don't want to open up that either because it might be as scary as that memory. Do you see?
Oh yeah. Well, I think the most important part of what you're talking about is it's not just one thing.
No.
It's not one thing. And when you first, introduced me to some of these things, I'm like, oh, listening to this person, I need to do this. And
Yes.
I'm gonna be good at this. And no, it wasn't how it went for me. That might have opened doors. It gave me a different perspective a little bit, but if it didn't resonate with me, it didn't happen. But I was willing, you need to be willing to open up to try some of those things and
If you're choosing
practice
to
them.
learn. Yeah, yeah, and practice, right. Now, as a practitioner, I've had the opportunity to have so many hundreds and hundreds of clients over the years, and I think it's been super interesting to watch that the awakening process grows. And again, this is why I get frustrated with this. Oh, I'm awake. The first one that I remember was still is a dear client and friend who was very, very earth when I
Mhm.
started with her years and years ago, and now is totally multidimensional and galactic as well, because it was a personal evolution of learning the dimensional fields.
Mhm.
And I think what happens right now is a lot of the YouTube craze of, UFOlogy and conspiracy and everything takes a lot of these people and jumps them up because I want to see the aliens and be galactic and I want my star family information, but they're not honoring possibly the fact that, yeah, but your body also resonates to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 dimensions within your own being before you even get to that space. So learn about the earth, learn about the trees, learn about the wind, learn what, they just want to jump it because this seems to be the hot button right now. So the true evolution of spiritual awakening that I've watched in my clients that is actually spontaneous, not spontaneous awakening, but spontaneous evolution, is oftentimes they start in one realm and then they grow into the other realms. A lot of people are earth at first and then grow into, oh my, I have plant and animal kingdom now. Oh my, now I'm starting to realize that there's ascended masters and gods and goddesses. Oh my, now I'm starting to see the angels, the archangels, the cherubs,
Mhm.
now I'm starting to see the galactics, etc. Or I will have a massive star seed that starts at all I see is galactics and grids, and I know nothing about the earth. And so they will devolve, not meaning detrimentally,
Yeah.
go down the chain this way to understand the oneness. So I've watched both.
Oh, I think you and I you were
Yeah.
up here and I was down
Yep.
here and we're both like you
Yep.
were, and I'm still doing this.
Yeah. We've talked about that before as
Yeah.
friends too. Besides, and that a lot of times the UFO thing, the aliens, the star people, all of that stuff is so positioned as cool, I guess. And
Mhm.
when I got to realization, one of the steps, when I got to realization, the star people are no different than any other being or body of God consciousness. And it's just as important for me to understand and work with the frequencies of a tree or a rock or a body of water or whatever to find that oneness. So you get over that ego as well.
Mhm.
Because in the spiritual community these days, the hot button is, my star family, my star family. And it's like, yeah, but what about your inner earth family?
Right.
What about What about that version of the star family? So there, to me, it's very personal. And I see a lot of people thinking that they're already amazing and wonderful and done. And it's like, yeah, but you're just learning. And we haven't even touched on the fact that then you can start to learn the Akash. I mean, that's where I go back to the holographic infrastructure of who and what we really are. That's where I go and just am, there's no way you can be done.
No, no. I mean, just meeting a new person changes. There's a change every time you have an interaction or you connect with someone or a tree or it
Mhm.
only helps in your growth. So you're constantly evolving and changing, I
And
think.
the hard part is that this is so personal right here. The hard part is when you have an amazing something, like over the top amazing experience,
Mhm.
and the human wants to duplicate that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like the one time in the entire time I've been doing this work, I saw the fairy realm. I have never duplicated it again. I
Yeah.
can see fairies really
And
easy.
with you, like, I want to see bring the
Yeah.
fairies out. Where are they?
Yeah, I can see the fairies really easy. I just can't see the realm. And it
Realm.
only happened once. And, I tried and asked and practiced and worked on it for years and years and years and years. And then I got my, 2 minutes of it, if that, 1 minute maybe. And boom, never again. And so I think this is where your ego comes into play again as a practitioner, even, much less just a person, to why can't I do that again?
Mhm.
And I think the other really difficult things is hearing, like we said, competing, hearing so-and-so does this. Well, I want to do that,
Mhm.
so-and-so does this. Well, I want to do that.
And
So
on the other side of that, I went through periods of time where I was really tough on myself because I wasn't doing those things. So to be kind to yourself and
mhm,
allow, yourself to move at the pace you're meant to move is
right.
really important. And that's hard because there's a lot of patience involved in that. And
Yes.
it's not not easy to, you know, just take your time with that. You
Because
just
the
want it
human
all.
is so competitive, where we just think, I want to do that because you get to do that.
Yeah.
I do my best when I get in those little monkey mind moments to remember that we each have a different piece of the puzzle. And
Mhm.
my job is not the same as yours. And I didn't come here to do it the same way you did. And that's why I have a hard time with, I love classes, I love books, I love instruction sets, I love all that, but then take it your own, make it your own, do it
Mhm.
your way.
Right.
That's
And
it.
that was part of the biggest and hardest part for me was the ego part of it. And
Still
that
is, yeah.
it still comes up because, you know, that's a whole lifetime of change of how I behaved and what I thought was important and all of the things that went with that, especially expectations,
I
and
I think
goals
that's
and
the hardest
years.
realization piece. That's the realization piece. The
Mhm,
stage of realization is, holy shit, everything I knew isn't real. Wait,
mhm.
what? And then
Yeah.
what is real? And I went through a really tough, probably at least 12 to 14 months of not thinking anything was real. And that was so hard because you can go mind bonkers thinking, well, if that isn't real, then nothing's real. And then you can really get trapped in that. And it can really be a rabbit hole that's tough to get out of, especially you don't have the ability to share that with somebody
No.
because they're like, well, of course it's real. What are you talking about? Or of course it's not real. What are you talking about? So there's that one part in the realization part where I remember distinctly flying out of my body oftentimes. Like I would be in the situation with a friend or my mom or in the car. And then all of a sudden just like, oh, wait a minute. And then it was like, I remember going, you are driving, get back in your body. I mean, I would fly out because things weren't like, this isn't real. What's real? And it's so dangerous. And there's no real training on any of that. And that's
No.
why grounding and bubbling is imperative in this process to be able to keep you in command of what's happening with your energies, especially now when everything's so mixed up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's there's so many influences right now. It's crazy.
Yeah. And
Mhm,
then lastly, I think what's really hard on the human ego is, we have a very tight group of practitioners, you included, that works together. And oftentimes we'll get really whiny and pissy and moany too, because it's like,
mhm.
well, I do all this work and yet I don't get this. And that is so human. And I do my best to nip that one in the bud, but man, can it come,
I
Here
know.
I'm working on that hologram all day long and I still can't pay my heat bill, I mean, those are very, or how come he or she gets to sit there and see a ship and, every day and I'm standing out there for 4 hours freezing my ass off and I can't see a thing, those are really, I think, very human typical things that are really destructive in the long run because you're self-deprecating, you're bashing yourself,
Yeah.
you're bashing the system, you're bashing everything.
Yeah, and that was the hardest thing, is to be kind to myself and have patience, and which was it's a big learning lesson, and I still go through it, like, and it's funny when the messages come through, it's like, you need to be patient. And I'm like, how much more patient am I supposed to be? Come
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
bring it on. And
Well, and I got yelled at from my guidance. They're like, I was literally bitching one day going, well, why do people get to see all the cloud formations turn into a ship? And why do they get to this? And why do they get to that? And they're like, I go, I don't get to see ships. And literally my guys are like, you're on them all the time. Why do you have to see them? And I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, oh, yeah.
it's for fun. Come on,
And then I'm
bring
like,
it
well,
on.
because it would be cool, right? I mean, that's, I still want it. Me.
Exactly.
We're
Yeah.
so
Good.
ridiculous. But again, I think that's one of the joys of being human. You get to realize how silly we are. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is, in my opinion, something that is going to be happening more and more. And I would really invite people not to judge the spiritual awakening process and the community itself. And, oh, I listened to this and now I know this and I do this, can be very judgmental because you don't. And I do. Is a separation, and that's not kind. And to be able to say, okay, well, you do this, this, and this, that's great. But it's very human again to judge. And it's separating even in the world of spiritual awakening. And so, and not everybody, and I'm going to make this point before we round down, not everybody will awaken. And it doesn't mean you're bad or broken. It just has to do with where your soul is at, where the frequency is at, what the mission is for you on earth at this time, if you're participating in the process of, et cetera, et cetera. And it doesn't mean you're bad if you haven't, and or it doesn't mean I have to worry if my husband or my kid or my mom hasn't. There isn't a thing that says this is right or wrong, good or bad.
Yeah, that's really, really important, because um that was a concern that I had, or a worry
Mhm.
that I allowed to happen when I first started, going through the process, was, well, what about my children? What about my husband? What about my mom and dad? Like,
Right,
am I separating myself from all of them? Am I ever going to be with them again?
right.
That's a really huge worry for me. And no, it's
Yeah.
all where it's meant to be. And
And it's all about the fractal. So if I'm a fractal, and I'll take my crystal right here, if I'm a fractal of source, literally I have prismatic fractals that have my purpose for being here. And maybe this particular fractal doesn't have that need to
mhm.
hold that frequency of awakening. They're just piece of it. And when we go back to oneness, that fractal that doesn't do it and the fractal that does do it completes a bigger fractal, which completes a bigger fractal. And so we don't lose our loved ones just because they haven't woken up. And this is like akin to the times of when, and I'm going to sound really bad right now, but bashing, I'm going to sound like I'm bashing religion, but it was when, you weren't saved, or, you haven't been saved. And I remember going through that as a Catholic, like, wow, if I haven't, or what was it? What was the wording that they used in when you got saved again, or what, born again?
Born
You were
again.
born
Yeah.
again. You were born, you aren't born again. Well, I remember my smart ass mom said, well, that's because I was born right the first time. And I thought that those were, again, similar things to under the umbrella of being Christian or godlike or, wonderful, we're separating. And that's
Yeah.
not kind, right? That's not
Right.
kind. But
Right.
man, did
Well,
families
because it creates
break up.
fear. And when you have fear, you're more vulnerable. You're more manageable.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
if you weren't saved or born again, you weren't going to go to a certain place as far as the God space goes. And that's all perspective. I always used to, as a kid, listen to that and think of the indigenous or the aborigines that are out in the middle of nowhere that don't know anything. Are they just shit out of luck? I mean, really? You know? No, they're not. They're probably going straight, to whatever. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
all in context. And I think that this is part of that warning to not necessarily think that everybody's going to be on the same level of spiritual awakening.
Mhm.
And me, I know for a fact that I have been at levels of awakening where I feel really great and confident, and then I take a nosedive because 3D life gets in the way.
Yeah, it
And I
does. And
and I
I
think
feel
that's
like you
okay.
feel like you're going backwards in places. Like what, like I've lost this. What's going
Yep.
on? You know,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden, you know, your part of it is to refocus and to open up to allow other things. You know, that's where I really struggled. Like I want to do the same things I was doing, like you
Right.
said before. Well, that's not where you're at right now. You need to
Right.
open up and allow, you know, that to come in that is meant to come in, or people are meant to come in that will show you or
Make space.
share with you another perspective.
Yep. Make space. Make space.
Hmm.
And integration is really difficult. And this is what I tell my clients, those that have a really big connection, for example, oh, my guides, my guides, my guides. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, they're all having a party and I wasn't invited. I'm on the other side of the door and it sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher, like, wah, 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 and I can't hear what they're saying anymore. I feel like I got kicked out of the group. I'm no longer one of the cool kids. All of those thoughts go through our ego. And 9 out of 10 times, if not 12 out of 10 times, it's integration. What that means is you've already downloaded, you have that information. Now it's cellularly important for you to be able to allow the integration of that. So the guidance pulls back because it goes through your entire holographic system to become part of who and what you are instead of what you're doing,
Hmm.
or who and what you are instead of what you're learning. It's becoming your normal. And so these integration periods can be very confusing during the spiritual awakening time because it feels like you got kicked out of the club and you
Oh
haven't.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. And then by the way, your mission changes some.
yes,
Like
yes.
you're what you're supposed to focus on, or not supposed to, not the right word, but what you're meant to do while you're here changes as you go because your skills change as you go. Your growth.
And the energy changes,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, the energy is changing. You know, it's so important. I feel like right now the energy is really in a place where it's a good time to dump the old stuff, you know, the old beliefs and the things that are keeping you from moving forward.
Mhm.
Now in January, February feels like a really good time to do that based on the energy and where things are,
Yeah.
so that you can move on and open up for new growth.
And
And
equinox in March is always a kicker, so take advantage of the quiet time. And we Minnesotans, are sitting here freezing our buns off today. And so it's equivalent to that in terms of just hunker down and go in. You don't always have to have these absolutely amazing experiences. Sometimes it's just flat. Flat means integration,
mhm,
right?
yeah,
So
right.
that's okay.
This was really a fun one. I really
Yeah,
like
the client variety just amazed me, from going to boom, I'm awakened and I know everything and I see everything and I hear everything, to the little popcorn things above clients' heads, to this one that can't share. I mean, it's just all over the board and I get to see them every day, which is such a gift and a joy for me to be able to just watch the process. And lastly, it usually means there's a thirst for more. I
that.
remember my thirst was unquenchable. I mean, it was just like constant for like 5 years. And just honor that thirst for more, but also ask for the guidance of what? What do I need next? I mean, I remembered my guides took me through very methodically. We want you to learn this realm. And then I would go to this point where I'm like, okay, that isn't exciting me anymore. And they're like, that's because we want you to now learn this realm. Mine was very methodical. Not everybody's is by any means, but it was like, we want you to learn about fairies. Now you've done that. We want you to learn about angels. Now you've done that. Now we want you to learn about masters. Now you've done that. And so it was very much knowing inner side and inside knowing that it was time to change up the curriculum. And that can come that way. But I also ask, I was constantly saying, what else? Why are you showing me this? What do you want me to do with this? I didn't just take things because it came to me. I questioned everything and still do. And I
Mhm.
think that's the relationship that's important with this process of question, 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 right?
Well, and in my experience, I know that I ebb and flow because I get so involved in my 3D life, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, well, I should be, what am I supposed to do now? Like, why am I in this? Like, and usually it's a place of, um, I needed to do that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
You look back and you understand there was a reason to do that. Um, and then it's refocusing and asking and, going through the meditations and it's amazing what comes your way when you go back into that mode again, you know?
Well, and clients of mine are multitudes of clients of mine. I used to do that. I used to be better at that.
Mhm.
I was really good for a long time. Now I don't. And that I would really like to stress, consider also that we signed up to be a human.
Yeah,
We signed up to be a human. And so when we bash 3D experiences, I think that that's really not the best idea in terms of we're supposed to still be having 3D experiences. Just because they're 3D doesn't mean I'm limited belief systems and experiencing from fear.
Mhm.
3D can still be, I'm enjoying the hell out of my grandkids. I don't
Right.
have to worry about blah, blah, blah right now. And so I think these are really, again, limitations and judgments that we put on this whole spiritual path journey thing when we talk about 3D as a bad thing. So, holidays are very 3D. You got to get stuff done, and you can either go bonkers with it or you can ride it with a different perspective. And that, I think, is the best thing about spiritual shifting is it is taking your perspective, it's taking your inner awareness, it's taking it to different levels. So
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah,
agreed.
cool. All
Agreed. I
right,
had a lot
anything
of
else?
Mary in my happy holidays this year. A
Huh?
little too much Mary in my holidays this year.
Yeah, that's what January and February are for.
I know, believe me.
Right? All right, everyone. Well, on behalf of Kim and I, thank you for listening. Please hit the subscribe and share button if you choose to, which we hope you do. Maybe leave a comment. And I don't know, until next time, right?
Until
Good luck
next
on your
time.
spiritual journey. Okay,
Yeah, yeah. See you
cool.
soon.
Cosmic hugs.